Your best friend or your worst enemy? There's quite a bit of distance, I would hope, between a best friend and a worst enemy, and more than likely for those who are blessed with an older brother or sister or a younger brother or sister, they can be certainly your best friend in time of trouble or your worst enemy in times of conflict. Our lesson today draws from this experience of siblings getting along and not getting along at the same time. Once again, favoritism plays a factor in this story. But we're moving along in our story away from Jacob, who's now named Israel, and to the children, the family, the group that will be the blessed family that will bless the world by their relationship with God. But it's the relationship among each other that is the telling story in our lesson today. We move along quite a bit. We're far down the road of the uterus competition. The game playing that Leah, who is lovely or nearsighted, and Rachel, the one whom Jacob Israel loves, and their handmaidens, Bilhah and Zilpah. Now, to catch us up with the story, there are now 11 children. The first 4, Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, all came to Leah, while Rachel remained barren. In this competition, Rachel decides to give her handmaiden to start competing with her older sister. Rachel gives Bilhah to Jacob to produce sons for herself, not unlike great-grandmother Sarah. And so Bilhah produces Dan and Naphtali. Not to be hoodwinked by this change of plans with Rachel, Leah now offers Zilpah, her handmaiden, to help with the contest. And from Zilpah comes Gad and Asher. And finally, after all of this, yet again Leah is pregnant twice with Issachar and Zebulun. And then also a daughter, Dinah, whose story, if you read further in Genesis, is tragic. Finally, after her own older sister has had 6 children and 2 more from her handmaiden, Rachel finally has a son of her own. And his name is Joseph. And it's Joseph that the story now shifts to, and will shift for the rest of Genesis, actually. Is what Joseph and his 11 brothers do in response to one another. Because Benjamin, the last of Rachel's children, has not been born yet, and Rachel will die from the experience of bearing Benjamin. So the one that is most loved, Joseph, is lost, and the one that remains, Benjamin, will lose his own mother. And so Jacob will be very possessive of Benjamin in the intervening story. But we catch up with Joseph first. Now, contrary to Andrew Lloyd Webber, it's not a Technicolor Dreamcoat. It's not a coat of many colors, despite the songs you may have heard about this. It's a jacket best described in a rather odd Hebrew expression as with sleeves. Now, very few jackets of the time had sleeves. Only royalty had sleeved jackets. So, obviously, a sign of favor from Jacob Israel, is this royal robe given to his first son from his beloved wife, Rachel. There's no evidence at all. The story doesn't seem to imply that Joseph used this favor to his advantage. If anything, he's guilty of dreaming a few dreams and sharing too much information with his siblings as well as with his parents, because even they, in the second dream story, seem to say, "Hold it, son. You need to stop this whole that we're going to be bowing and worshiping you at some point, or have these dreams about giving you allegiance." Joseph seems to be maybe that persnickety younger brother that catches you in a lie or knows you've done something wrong and gets you into trouble. A bit of a tattletale, and it's telling who Joseph has tattletaled on. It's on the handmaid children. It's on Gad and Asher or Dan and Naphtali. We don't know. It's just the handmaiden children. The handmaiden sons were the ones that were caught doing something, and Joseph told them and they got in trouble. So we have Joseph the dreamer, who might be sharing too much information that irritates his other siblings. We have Joseph the tattletale, who has irritated a particular part of his brothers, the ones that are his half-brothers in truth. And still the contest between the two wives, between Leah and Rachel. Now it's telling in our story what happens. Joseph is sent by his father to check in on the brothers. Now, this is not simply going next door in this journey. This is at least 60 miles away, so that Joseph travels very far. The brothers have wandered, as they usually do when tending flocks. You travel to where the good pastures are, and they have traveled far and away from where Jacob, Israel, is encamped. So Joseph is sent with his sleeved robe. And he's told that they have moved on from the place where Jacob, Israel, thought they were, on to a place further away, about 70 miles total, between Jacob and his son Joseph and the brothers. And it's there, as he's approaching, that no doubt the handmaiden brother, still a little hot, shall we say, from the experience of being told upon, having a bad report delivered to mom and dad, saying, "Okay, here comes the dreamer. Let's kill him." And so they grab him, seize him, and put him in a dry container, a cistern, that has no water in season, because it could have been the rainy season, and therefore this well could have been filled with water. So it's empty. His coat has been removed, and he's thrown into a cistern. Quite the change. And while this has happened, the brothers are commiserating. And it's telling who is the one to first speak up. It is Reuben, the oldest of Leah's sons, that says, "We shouldn't kill one of our own." And he's right. One of the most horrifying things you can still do in the Middle East is to kill someone and leave their body to just be cast to the birds and animals. Everything deserves a proper burial in the Middle East. And so abandoning your brother and then abandoning his body would be double the trouble and would compound the sin already. So Reuben is a little wiser in saying, let's hold off on doing this terrible deed. Let's think this out a bit. And then later, Simeon also comes to the aid. Now, and Judah actually comes to the aid. And Judas is noticing that they're not far from a traveling road and say, okay, we can't kill him and we can't let him stay here. Let's negotiate the best deal to get rid of our troublesome sibling. Let's see if we can name that price and send him on his way. That way he's vanished before us without us bearing the blood guilt of killing him. And so it's interesting. We don't know why the Midianites and the Ishmaelites are mentioned, but they are both groups of outsiders, and it may be a case that both negotiated at some point, but it's the Ishmaelites, which is interesting in its own point. This is extended family again. This is the descendants of Ishmael, Abraham's half-son, that are traveling and trading with Egypt and bringing down things that are needed for what? Needed for the mummification trade. Needed for all the things about giving life and providing for someone in death. And so they negotiate at the standard rate for a slave and take their youngest brother, the one whom Jacob loved, the child of his old age, and sold him to traders who would eventually sell him into slavery in Egypt. What could have been a horrible, desperate effort in a relationship has been transformed, strangely, by trading him off. Joseph is no more in the eyes of his father, and of course they will dip the beloved coat of sleeves in blood, and it looks clear to Jacob Israel that his son has been killed by a wild beast. And he mourns for his only son at this point from his beloved wife, Rachel. And the brothers doing a horrible thing, selling one of their own siblings, at least didn't go so far as to kill him in the first place. What's interesting about this story is how little God is in it. I mean, God in action, where there's nothing about neither the dreams nor the different activities, except that in each of the decisions that were made, in a sense, and in hindsight, as Joseph will reveal at the end of the book of Genesis, all of these terrible sins that were happening, all of these oversights, all of these envy, jealousies, all of these problems that come from being favored actually worked to save them when the time of desperation, when the time of famine came across the very land where they had been hurting and dealing with living off of the wealth of the land for many, many years now. 3 generations living in the land of Canaan. So unexpectedly, the one that's sold into slavery would be able to set them free from the slavery of famine. The one who is imprisoned is the one who will give them their freedom. Not without a pretty good story, and I encourage you to read the rest of Genesis, as we only have another section in our own look at Genesis to go, and it really is towards the end, when Joseph, who is hiding himself and not revealing, keeping a secret identity, so to speak, as prime minister of Egypt, of all places, to reveal that it is indeed their long-lost brother. What lesson can be gained from this story that could have ended awfully for a brother being murdered outright to merely a brother being sold into slavery? Well, my question for you would be, where are you keeping your brother? Are you keeping your brother or sister or whoever you have a rivalry with, are you keeping them in a dry cistern just trying to figure out where to go with this? Do you harbor those same thoughts that the other brothers, the sons of Zilpah and Bilhah, did, that you really would prefer if your sibling no longer existed? Now, I will be honest, I do not know the nature of your relationship with any of your family members, and I do not know the pain they have caused in your life. But I think it's important to consider that keeping life and respecting it, even in the midst of a struggle, is better than taking it outright. Maybe it is time for you to pull your brother, sister, rival, family member out of the dry well that you put them in, because they may be just like Joseph. There's nothing in the story that says he was a spoiled, rotten brat. There is something about him obviously being able to perceive in dreams, which will come in very handy throughout his life and will be saving him from death each time, even though the dreams were certainly not favorable to his brothers and to his own parents. But how? How will you live? What will be the consequences of your jealousy and envy? What will be the outcome of it? Would you rather sell it out, be rid of him, never to see him again, only to have it later revealed that, surprisingly, God redeems that shortcoming into life-sustaining grace, into saving the special family, into saving the entire family from the destruction of a famine for many years, and providing sanctuary, in a sense, redeeming Egypt, which has been a bit troubled in its relationship with the family through the years. Each and every time Abraham, as well as Isaac, got in trouble, it tended to happen in the land of Egypt. Now, of course, what this anticipates is the eventual enslavement of Israel under Egyptian rule, and the exile followed by the Exodus. So God's presence seems to be involved and attentive, even in the midst of all these terrible things that happen within a family. This chosen son becomes an indentured servant, but this indentured servant who vanishes from his family, is thought to be dead by his father and never sees his mother again, rises from the captivity to freedom as a court official. And yes, they will indeed all bow unknowingly to give him honor and glory. Favor has its consequences, unexpected as well as expected. What will your favor give as consequences? Amen.